known McCoy Tyner for a long time. He called me to play on a record of his 20 years ago, you know? And, you know, he's just such a giant of jazz, you know? It was really intimidating for me to play with him. And I was pretty confident 20 years ago. So I'm gonna talk to him about that and see if he remembers, because for him it probably, he might not even remember the date, you know? It was a big deal for me. But I would love to talk to him and just see what he's up to and see how he's doing, because he's one of the few remaining giants that we have. You know what I'd also like to do, man? I'd also like to talk to these guys and maybe talk to them in front of the audience and interview them myself, because I think that as a musician and because I know them so well, I could probably ask questions that other people might not remember to ask or might not think to ask, you know?
And I'm so glad to be able to present a living legend, ladies and gentlemen, McCoy Tyner. McCoy Tyner.
First played with McCoy Tyner in 1986. The album was called Double Trios, and that was because McCoy on that album, he played with two different groups, and I was in one of the groups. And it was fantastic to play with McCoy, you know. The only problem was, you know, after McCoy finished soloing, he would always look at you and go, okay, it's your turn. And there was never anything left to play, because McCoy played everything. You know, he's such an incredible musician. Some people say that McCoy in the 60s when he played with John Coltrane had a feminine sound. I can think of a million words to describe McCoy Tyner's playing, but feminine is never the word that would ever come into my mind to describe McCoy Tyner. I mean, his sound that he developed in the 60s was the perfect complement to John Coltrane, and the thing I think of is powerful. You know, I mean, he played so powerfully. I mean, I don't know how you can play a piano in that group, because Elvin Jones was creating thunderstorms on the drums, and Train was playing all this intensity. I mean, McCoy had this piano, man, and I mean, just to be able to be heard in that environment is a feat. So he's incredible, man, because the piano's an instrument that everybody in the world plays. There's millions of people who play the piano over centuries, and you can hear three notes and you know it's McCoy Tyner. And not only that, every piano player who plays jazz, every single one, has to study McCoy Tyner when they learn how to play jazz. That's an incredible, incredible feat on that instrument, you know, because it's an instrument that's so hard to make your own. I mean, you don't use your mouth, you don't use any part of your internal body, like your voice, you know, you don't use any. It's just striking a key. And to be able to strike them in such a way that people can instantly recognize you, and strike them in a way that's so profound that everybody else feels like they have to play like that, that's really incredible.
Man, McCoy's like one of my favorite piano players. Of course, the work that he did with John Coltrane and his quartet, you know, was some very innovative music. Goes without saying. His style of piano playing was revolutionary. A lot of piano players today copy his style, a lot of them. So there's another icon right there, you know, McCoy. For me, is also one of the great composers, too. There's this one song that he wrote called The Twilight Mist. I've been trying to get him to play it with me. He says doesn't remember it. Like, I like his music, the tunes that he writes as well. Playing with him is just like exciting. You can feel the energy of his sound coming through, and you have to really kind of like play it with an energetic feeling to match it. You can't just like go through the motions. You have to really come from inside your heart and your spirit and really express yourself when you play with McCoy.
I love McCoy. I grew up with McCoy in New York City. I loved to go and hear McCoy play. My dream when I started out as a jazz singer was to be able to record with McCoy Tyner, or at least to work with McCoy. I used to go to see him at clubs in New York City and take a notebook and write poetry while he was playing. His music always evokes Africa for me because of the way that he plays his rhythms and his chordal structures, and I always hear overtones of Africa. Very subtle, but very, very distinctive. For me, McCoy is one of the most prolific jazz pianists that jazz has known. I think in a lot of ways, he was underrated for many years, and he's really receiving the respect and the kudos that he should have been getting a long time ago now.
You know, when you talk about McCoy, the first thing comes to mind is the fourth chords, you know, the way he moves his fourth chords is just unique. I think playing fourth exists before him, but he's the one who brings it to another level, you know, like play any kind of changes in fourth and move them, you know, chromatically. He just do it in his own way, you know. I don't see anybody else who do that like that, you know. So I remember even when I was in Berkeley, you know, we have some classes. If you want to check McCoy Tyner voicing, you know, like Herbie's voicing, you know, Bill Evans voicing. So all these guys, what makes them unique is they have their way to approach any type of harmony.
Ladies and gentlemen, McCoy Tyner. When I hear you play, I hear the entire history of the piano. So tell me, when did you start playing the piano?
I was about 13. Yeah.
Oh, okay. For a pianist, that's relatively late, isn't it?
Yeah, my mother was wonderful. She was a beautician, and my piano was in her beauty shop.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I remember I'd have jam sessions in the shop. My mother said, "Oh, go ahead. You
Really?
guys could play." It would be like 10 players sitting next to a lady under the dryer.
With curlers. Ah, that's great.
And she was patting her foot. She said, "Boy, he's swinging while he's curling."
Yeah, you sound good. So 13 years old. And what was your first, who was the first piano player that made you go, you know what, I want to do this?
Well, the thing is, the Powell family lived in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. Bud Powell and Richie Powell.
Bud Powell came to the beauty
He
shop?
came to the beauty shop. He didn't get his hand out though. No, he just came by and he was standing outside. I looked around and he was camping in the neighborhood. And I think he heard the piano or something like that. And he stopped, you know, and he was listening. I was like, oh my goodness, Bud Powell's out there.
Wow.
Yeah, he was.
So what struck you, you know, you hear the records of Bud Powell. What struck you when you actually saw him play? Was there anything that surprised you?
Was his not only his dexterity, but his conviction. His
conviction.
I mean, you could tell music was an important element in his life.
Yes.
And hadn't been that way. You know, he was kind of a recluse person. He,
Right.
You know, didn't talk much or whatever, you know. But you know, when he says something, you listen.
You listen.
Know, especially with music.
Sure. And did you get to talk to him about music?
Well, no, not really. I
Right.
mean, all he had to do was play.
Right. That was all the
he
talking
would,
he had to
he
do,
would
yeah.
come in and play, and he would, you know. And then,
Wow.
tenure with Coltrane was one of the greatest experiences of my life. Well, I met him, I was like a teenager. But working with him, I had a chance to develop it and bring it out. He gave us a lot of freedom.
How old were you when you met John
I
Coltrane?
guess I might have been about 16 or 17.
Okay, got
And
it.
but he was with Miles Davis. He had worked with
Okay.
Miles, and I was around Philly, and so he grew up there. He was from
Okay.
North Carolina,
But he grew up in Philly.
he grew up in Philly, yeah, and that's what I met him because I made some gigs with him. He called me. I was playing with Cal Massey's band.
Okay. Mhm.
Cal and John were good friends.
So then tell me, you're in John Coltrane's group, and Train is starting to, his solos are getting longer and longer, right? And Elvin's getting into his thing. These guys are growing before your very eyes, as you are. And there was a certain time when you just stopped. You just stopped playing and let John and Elvin go. So was it just simply you couldn't hear yourself anymore? Or was it simply because Train, his harmonic thing was getting so complex that you didn't want to be in his way? What was your thinking when you just laid out, when you just stopped playing?
Well, the thing is, I think playing with Elvin was very challenging because he being that Hank Jones' brother and
Hank
dad,
Jones, yeah.
So he had a very great feeling for the piano.
Okay.
And of course,
Elvin.
Elvin did, yeah, and they looked on me as
Oh,
a little
no.
bit kind of
That's
protective.
just what you need, a drummer who plays the piano too, making suggestions, right?
Yeah. He said, "Oh, you're doing this too much. You're doing this."
right.
He was like a big brother.
Right, okay. Were you
I had
the
to
youngest one?
behave.
He influenced so many drummers as well. There's so many guys who do this Elvin Jones style, which is just very polyrhythmic, very exciting. Are they missing something? I mean, have you played with anybody who really kind of understood what Elvin was doing?
Well, it's hard to copy somebody like that.
Yes.
I mean, you can be inspired by somebody, but actually, you take what's good for you. I mean, like a lot of guys, like I listen to Thelonious and Bud Powell,
Right.
but I heard different things in their playing.
Right.
You know,
And you
so
took what was good
I
for you.
wasn't trying to. You can't emulate. You can't be somebody else. Ultimately, you have to look for you, find out what you want.
Someone to make my life an adventurous dream. Oh, what wouldn't I give for someone who'll take my life and make it seem gay as they say it ought to be. Oh, why can't I have a love like that brought to me? My is watching the noon crowds searching the promenade, seeking a clue to the one who will someday be mine. Something to live for. I want something to live for.
I started singing when I was very little, and I realized that really what jazz players would do, they would change the song every time they would play it. So at the time I was too little, and okay, my dad had told me, you know, this is improvisation. I just had an intuitive knowledge of it, but it became a little bit more deep when I realized that, for example, I would listen to to a certain amount of versions of the same tune, and I would notice how different they were from performer to performer, or even within the same performer's production, but in different ages, in different times of the career. So I noticed it pretty much very soon, the importance of doing your own thing. So that's, say, in music in general.
Say I want to be no woman me. I'm in love with whoever likes me the way I am. I have my faults, he likes my faults, I'm not very bright. We may not be right, he thinks I'm present, but it's grand for me. He may be wrong if we get along with a weak girl, say we. Walking on the shore, swimming in the sea. When I am with him, I'm glad the girl is with him. It's nobody else but me.
Jazz is definitely the art of the encounter. It's the reason why also we have a certain type of vocabulary. The reason why a musician, I think, should really build on the basis of knowing the tradition well is because that builds up your vocabulary. The deeper and the farther down in the ground this knowledge goes, the more you have a vocabulary. And the reason why you need a vocabulary is because you can communicate with other people. And that's what we do. So at a certain point, if you have this thing ingrained in you, then you don't need to predispose things or to, study things ahead of time, and you're going to be able to get together with people and play something on the spur of the moment and possibly make something happen that's really happening in the moment, which is the purpose of this kind of music.
She'll be a beautiful day, I'll say. He thinks I'm grand and that is grand for me. He may be wrong, but if we get along, what do we tell? Say we, walking on the shore, swimming in the sea. When I am with him, I'm glad the girl is with him. There's nobody else but me. Nobody else but me.
People want to know why we have Dee Dee Bridgewater, who I haven't played with. And I asked around and said, okay, who's a great popular singer here who performs in Europe often? And they said, well, what about Dee Dee Bridgewater? And I go, I love Dee Dee Bridgewater. When I was 17, she had like 2 fantastic albums that I listened to all the time. And although she and I haven't played together, I've played with everyone that she played with, and she's played with everyone that I've played with. So I'm sure that, when we see each other, it's like family, So I can't wait to see her on the boat and get to really talk to her again, She's got a beautiful album cover where it's a silhouette and she doesn't have any clothes on and she's pregnant, the side view. And, this thing that, people are always afraid of, the pregnant body. And it's just such a beautiful thing, man. And it always struck me, that she did that and that it was so beautiful. It changed my whole perception of pregnancy and the whole thing.
To speak of Dee Dee Bridgewater is to speak of a musician, not just a singer. So when you hear her sketching, it reminds you of the Ella Fitzgeralds of the world, who actually were far more than singers, they were musicians. And again, my Uncle Peanuts is another one who, when you hear him, you hear the fact that he's actually a saxophone player. When he sings and he scats, you go, wow, this is not something that a singer would do, this is something that a saxophone player would do. And that's the same thing with Dee Dee, she sings something, you say, well, Dizzy Gillespie would play that, And so I have a special affinity as a musician for singers who can really sort of morph into an instrument.
My musical accent? Well, I'm East Coast, Midwest, West Coast, France, Broadway. I'm a mixed bag of tricks. I'm a very mixed bag of tricks. And I think because of that mixed bag, that's why I have always sought to do something different with every recording project that I've done. I can feel very much at home doing the kind of music that Kirk Whalum does or that Marcus does, because that was part of my music in like the 70s. And this kind of smooth fusion jazz thing. I can, of course, do the straight ahead because that's what I grew up with, so I can hold my own, and I can hold my own in it in just about any setting. So, but I'd say that the Dee Dee Bridgewater today is moving more towards really trying to develop her own musical style, and since I've gone through this process of finding my African ancestry, and I'm working with West African musicians from Mali, I really feel that I have finally been able to put together all of the pieces of this dispersed Dee Dee Bridgewater into one. And I feel like I finally have completed myself in doing this project, and also in going to Mali and feeling very strongly that that's where my African ancestry is from.
You got it. Won't you speak love to me? Speak love to me. Speak love to me. Speak love to me.
When she says, why don't you speak low to me, that's her sign for the
Ira and I met in '89 in Paris. And as a bass player, I think Ira is probably one of the most prolific young bass players that we have today. Ira is a bass player who does not need to use a lot of notes and to show technique. When he does solos, I feel that his solos are more thought out, and he says a lot with little notes. And I love the fact that he really plays the bottom of the bass. He's got a wonderful, full, warm sound with his bass. Edsel Gomez is one of the most amazing pianists I've ever heard. I think because the fact that Edsel is Puerto Rican, he brings this kind of Latin feeling to whatever it is he plays. But he has a way of playing that is so percussive and is so unique. When he solos, it's like they're like these mini explosions. And he has such a wonderful light touch to the piano. And he's an amazing accompanist. He's really very special and very, very talented. And I suspect he's going to go very far, probably without me. But I'm enjoying the years that he's with me.
Will you speak low to me? Will you speak love to me?
Thank you very much. Ira, on that beautiful bass work. Yes, yes. And Edsel once again on that piano. Thank you.
I feel very strongly that you have to have a very solid bass. Whatever musical style you decide to do. But as a jazz musician, you've got to have a very strong bass. You've got to have a large vocabulary of what we call standards, which for instrumentalists is a separate list than it is for singers. You also need to have an understanding of harmonies, or at least be able to hear it if you don't, or haven't studied music, which is my case. You've got to have really big ears, and you've got to be able to know your melodies backwards and forwards so that you can improvise off of them. And once you've really gone through that period of honing down the knowledge of the basics, then you arrive at a place where you are not trying to better yourself technically because you've got all of your techniques down. It really becomes a spiritual and a personal musical experience. And that's where I'm at. I would say that my current album, Red Earth, reflects my life because it is the result of a personal search that I decided to make to find my African ancestry. So yes, it definitely reflects my life. I guess all of my music reflects different parts of me, and it has to do with where I am at that particular moment. So I'd say yes, my music is an extension of me, but not all of me. Can't have all of me.
Six months from now, when I think about this this event here, I'll remember a lot of things. You know, I remember my dad playing with me on the gospel hour, you know, which was very nice. He was a passenger on the ship for the first 4 or 5 days, and we did a gospel program on Sunday morning, and I got my dad to come and play the organ with me for one song. So that'll be a memory. Playing with Herbie Hancock and playing his music, and seeing Poogie and Grégoire doing such a good job playing with Herbie for the first time. I'll never forget that. Getting to interview Herbie Hancock and getting to interview McCoy Tyner and hearing them tell me stories about their life, I'll never forget that, you know. I'll never forget the jam sessions we had in these little smaller places, you know, because we had a main concert hall that we did, and that we had, and those were really the places where your main shows happened. But there were so many other small little places where we got together and jammed, and we had such a good time. I think that a lot of the people who go to concerts all the time, they enjoyed the jams more because it was something that they'd never seen. Our first show here for my group was the very first night of the cruise. And it was a regular show, you know? I didn't know anyone in the audience. You perform like you always performing. You make your connection through the music, you know? But then for 8 days, I'm on the ship and I'm meeting everybody. And we played again at the end of the cruise yesterday. It was a completely different show because now I know just about everyone in the audience. And it's a completely different feeling playing for people that you know. You take your time. You don't feel like you have to worry about losing the energy, you know? When you don't know people, I'm always trying to manage energy during my shows. You know, when I don't know the audience, just make sure they don't fall too low or they get too high too early, you know, just manage so that it goes like that. But when I knew everyone in the audience, I could really take my time. I explained long stories about the songs I was about to play, and it's very nice. And I think it opened me up to maybe do some of that even when I don't know the audience, because I think it's a nice way to communicate, and I think that my music gained more appreciation when I took the time to really explain to people what was going on when I wrote the piece. So I think I might even try to incorporate that and try to act as if I know the audience anyway, you know, when I don't know them, and see what I can get from that, because I think I learned a lot in this situation.